Jasmine Crockett stood at the centermost of the Supreme Cloister Chamber. A blaze lights absorption off her red clothing as she faced Arch Amends John Roberts. Her beating was fast, but her announcement backward calm. Moments earlier, Roberts had attempted to cut her off with a sharp, "Congresswoman, that's enough." His articulation echoed above the marble room, cartoon quiet murmurs from the crowd. Bodies exchanged looks as a striction advanced through the chamber. Crockett anchored her anchor on her notes, but didn't footfall back. Standing afore 9 justices and an abounding allowance of observers, Roberts, with his lifetime arrangement and about 2 decades arched the nation's accomplished court, seemed abiding he could black out an aboriginal appellation adumbrative from Texas. But Crockett, with her accomplishments as a prosecutor and her close annual of the Constitution, beheld this as her adventitious to appearance he was amiss to abolish her. She leaned advanced slightly, her articulation abiding and clear. "With respect, Mr. Archjustice, the architecture doesn't accord you the ascendancy to blackout an adopted adumbrative discussing voting rights." The alcove fell absolutely quiet. Roberts's announcement stiffened, afraid by the absolute built-in claiming to his authority. This was no best a procedural disagreement. It was agitation about the responsibilities of board and the acceptation of autonomous representation, and Crockett was able to avert both. The courtroom's academic lighting casting austere accent as Robert sat centered amid the 9 justices. His bathrobe was crisp, his beam focused. Soft whispers came from the arcade as the agent announced. "The Atonement Cloister recognizes Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. Actualization as acquaintance of the court." Roberts offered a baby nod and said, "Representative Crockett from Texas's 30th District. You accept 10 minutes." His articulation agitated the abounding weight of his position. A conservative-leaning Arch Amends appointed by President Bush in 2005, accepted for an alerted mission to the law and accurate absorption to attainable perception. Crockett approached the podium, her red clothing allegory the aphotic cops of the chamber. At 42, this apprentice adumbrative from Dallas agitated the attendance of Addition, who had spent years as a civilian rights advocate and accompaniment legislator. With acceptability for direct, above-board communication, she had bound become a arresting articulation on built-in issues, abnormally voting rights, the focus of today's hearing. "Thank you, Mr. Archjustice, and may it amuse the court," she began, her articulation bushing the space. "I angle afore you today not abandoned as an affiliate of Congress, but as Addition who has abandoned witnessed how attenuated voting rights accept silenced communities in Texas and above the country." She paused, authoritative advised I acquaintance with the justices. "This case is not artlessly about abstruse rules. It's about whether we still accept that every American should accept according admission to the ballot." Roberts hardly confused in his seat, announcement still composed, but his boring narrowing. "This case, Williams adjoined Texas Acclamation Commission, was never advised to draw civic attention. It focused on Aborigine ID requirements. Abstruse affair Roberts accepted, would accept basal attainable scrutiny. But Crockett's captivation had confused the spotlight, cartoon media advantage in an abounding courtroom. Crockett gestured to join the architecture displayed in the chamber. "Back this cloister attenuated key protections in Shelby County. We were told safeguards would remain. Yet actuality, we are a decade after seeing the absolute forms of Aborigine abolishment the Voting Rights Act was meant to prevent." The admirers grew close as Roberts leaned forward, his animation bent by the microphone. The battle was now unmistakable. This was not abandoned about a distinct case, but about the broader administration of the Roberts Cloister on voting rights. Amends Kagan glanced at Roberts, afresh ashamed at Crockett, acquainted the Astriction building. Amends Thomas backward apoplectic, while Amends Jackson leaned in, acutely interested. "The Texas law afore you today," Crockett continued, "creates obstacles that disproportionately affect Atramentis and Latino voters. The abstracts is clear. Back 23% of Atramentis Texans abridgment the specific ID adapted by this law, compared to 4.7% of white Texans. This is not a aloof policy. This is the avant-garde agnate of a poll tax." Roberts's jaw tightened, cameras communicable his discomfort. This was not the attenuated accustomed altercation he anticipated. Crockett was authoritative, the disparities barefaced for anybody alert and acknowledging her claims with numbers and built-in principles. "Congresswoman," he disconnected his accent firm. "Amuse absolute your animadversion to the specific accustomed questions afore the court. It was his aboriginal attack to arrest her, attenuate arresting that she was entering area he adopted to avoid. Crockett nodded politely, but captivated her ground. Mr. Arch-Justice, the accustomed affair actuality is whether this law violates the 14th and 15th Amendments, and we cannot abode that after analytical these disparities. She connected after hesitation, abiding to her notes. Back 87-year-old veterans who accept voted in every acclamation ashamed abiding from Korea ashamed lose admission to the ballot. We are ambidextrous with a built-in problem. The arcade bankrupt into murmurs afore Roberts silenced the allowance with a quick bang of the gavel. The altercation was now audibly visible. Crockett, a Senate affiliate of Congress and above civilian rights attorney, was anon adjoined Roberts, the arch-amends who had helped appearance avant-garde acclamation law. This had confused above a simple, accustomed discussion. It had become an added battle over who determines the acceptation of built-in voting protections. As cameras accurate the exchange, political reporters typed rapidly. On-screen cartoon at CNN already read, showdown at SCOTUS. Crockett challenges Roberts on voting rights. A cogent built-in agitation was now advance in a bounding attainable view. The restriction-connected architecture as Crockett proceeded with her presentation, laying out how the Texas Aborigine ID law created afresh obstacles for boyhood voters. She remained steady, pointing to abstracts archive her aggregation had prepared, assuming bright ancestral disparities in Aborigine admission above counties. Back we attending at how this law functions in practice, she said, we see that in counties with above Atramentis and Latino populations, DMV offices, the abandoned places to access the adapted ID, accept bargain hours, connected delay times, and are generally afar abroad from attainable transit. This isn't random. Its arrangement begin throughout the state. Roberts confused again, visibly afraid with her absolute focus on race. He had connected adopted discussing voting rules after attached them to ancestral impact, emphasizing accompaniment ascendancy over elections. Crockett's admission was banishment, a altercation he had again approved to sidestep. Congresswoman, he said sharply, arresting already more. The cloister is acquainted of the ample statistics. Amuse abode the specific built-in essay that applies in this case. This was not artlessly procedural guidance. It was an accomplishment to move the altercation abroad from lived adventures and ashamed into abstruse doctrine. The arcade reacted, essay the aboriginal above a fray amid the arch-amends and the apprentice lawmaker. Amends Barrett looked to join Roberts while amends Sodomy leaned in, alert closely. Crockett paused for a moment, took a sip of water and replied respectfully. Mr. Arch-Justice, I am acclamation the built-in essay beneath Arlington Heights and what charcoal of the Voting Rights Act. Back abominable appulse combines with absolute patterns. It creates anticipation that requires austere scrutiny. She had not retreated. Instead, she angry her affirmation anon to accustomed precedent. Roberts's announcement anchored slightly. The cloister is accustomed with the precedent, he responded. With respect, Your Honor, Crockett said, her accent growing firmer. Antecedent abandoned affairs back, it is activated consistently. In Brnovich, this cloister accustomed abominable impact, but still upheld Arizona's regulations. I am answer why the severity of this appulse requires a altered aftereffect here. A beachcomber of murmurs advanced through the chamber. She had referenced addition arguable Roberts' cloister accommodation that bargain voting protections. Cameras bent amends Kagan comatose while amends alto frowned, a moment that would after broadcast widely. Roberts broke his microphone. Congresswoman Crockett, this cloister decides cases based on built-in principles, not action judgments. Amuse abide your accustomed argument. His accent agitated a dismissive edge, a about face that would anon draw attention. Crockett nodded and confused to her arch evidence. Let me appearance what built-in attack attending like in practice. Your Honor, she gestured to her aide who broadcast abstracts to the justices. These are affidavit statements from 72 Texas voters who were denied their adapted to vote admitting assorted good faith attempts to accede with this law. She aerial the aboriginal statement. Mary Wilson, 84 years old, built in at home in East Texas in 1939 back bearing certificates were rarely issued to Atramentis families in the Jim Crow South. She has voted in every acclamation ashamed 1965, but actuality angry abroad in 2022 because the name on her ablution certificate, her abandoned affidavit of birth, had an altered average antecedent than her amusing Aegis card. Crockett confused to the abutting statement. James Fuentes, she said, a disabled adept who couldn't renew his authorization because the abandoned DMV oral 50 miles of his rural home is not wheelchair accessible. Staff told him to drive to the abutting county. With anniversary example, Crockett was authoritative a bright point, abutting accustomed standards to absolute Aborigine experiences, demonstrating that these built-in apropos couldn't be absolved as abstruse errors. The arcade listened closely, and several reporters recorded every detail. Roberts's backbone was visibly thinning. He glanced at the clock, a fresh disconnected already more. Congresswoman, abandoned accounts about compelling, do not authorize a built-in pattern. We charge you to abode the accustomed standard, not affecting narratives. His best of words opened the aperture Crockett had been cat and mouse for. She straightened, looked anon at him, and delivered her aboriginal close rebuttal. Mr. Arch-Justice, with respect, the architecture was not accounting for abstruse theories. It was accounting to assure absolute Americans like Ms. Wilson and Mr. Fuentes. Back the 15th alteration says the adapted to vote shall not be denied or bound based on race. It does not accommodate exceptions for annoying facts. The arcade reacted quietly. Amends Jackson looked up while Amends Thomas aside article to Amends Allo. The altercation had now confused from action to a broader agitation over how built-in protections should be applied. Roberts's announcement anchored as he accomplished for the gavel. Congresswoman, this is a accustomed proceeding, not a aldermanic hearing. Maintain adapted decorum. Instead of retreating, Crockett accustomed the apprenticeship and apprenticed on. Adapted decorum, Your Honor, includes acquainted the absolute apple a pulse of built-in violations. I am actuality, because voters in my commune are actuality, denied a axiological right. She angry adjoin Amends Barrett. Amends Barrett, during your acceptance hearing, you declared the adapted to vote as fundamental. Yet the law afore the cloister has acutely prevented bags of acceptable voters from participating. How can that survive built-in review? Roberts interjected immediately. Congresswoman Crockett, you will abode the cloister collectively, not abandon justices, and you will not ask them absolute questions. The allowance grew tense. Roberts had attempted several times to beacon her argument, but she connected presenting it on her terms. The antithesis amid branches of government was now actuality activated in absolute time. A. Arch-Amends asserting ascendancy, and an affiliate of Congress abnegation to be silenced. Crockett nodded but remained firm. I apologize for the absolute question, Mr. Arch-Justice. Let me abode the cloister as a whole. How can a law that demonstrably prevents bags of acceptable voters from casting an acclamation survive a say beneath the 14th and 15th Amendments? Roberts leaned forward, acutely frustrated. Congresswoman Crockett, you accept again abandon this court's instructions on presenting argument. If you cannot chase our procedures, your time will be shortened. The admonishing agitated cogent wait. A. Arch-Amends because acid often adopted a dumbrative during a voting rights hearing. Assemblage in the gallery, including civilian rights leaders, took note. Cameras recorded the reactions of the justices, some of whom looked afraid at Roberts's tone. Crockett paused, accomplished into her folder, and captivated up a certificate no one expected, an archetype of the Constitution. Mr. Arch-Justice, she said, her accent steady. Afore my time is shortened, I accept we should revisit a certificate that precedes both your ascendancy and mine. A focused quiet acclimatized over the alcove as she captivated up the Constitution, her absorption anchored on Roberts. Article 1, she began, establishes Congress as a co-equal annex of government. Back I allege here, I do so not abandoned as counsel, but as a dumbrative of 750,000 Americans whose voting rights are anon at stake. Roberts's announcement hardened. Congresswoman, your position does not admission you appropriate a say in this courtroom. All advocates chase the aforementioned rules. Crockett responded after hesitation. With respect, Your Honor, it doesn't accord me appropriate treatment. It gives me a built-in obligation to allege for my capacity back their rights are threatened. She aerialed the architecture slightly. The founders created 3 according branches to ensure none could black out another. Quiet murmurs advanced through the room. Amends Kagan aloft her eyebrows while Amends Sodtower leaned in. Roberts broke the gavel already more. Congresswoman Crockett, this is your final warning. Abode the accustomed issues, or your altercation will end. What happened to budding would become the focal point of advantage above networks. Crockett opened her architecture to a apparent section. Mr. Arch-Justice, she said, now speaking added deliberately. I am acclamation the axial built-in catechism adverse this cloister and our democracy. She is secular to the page. Article 1. Area 2 establishes that associates of Congress represent the bodies directly. The 15th alteration prohibits ancestral bigotry in voting. The 14th guarantees according protection. She stepped hardly closer. Back you abuse to blackout me for discussing how my capacity or actuality denied their adapted to vote. You are not artlessly administration procedure. You're embodying the built-in crisis I came actuality to address. Blackout fell above the chamber. The barter had confused above attorney's procedure. Crockett had reframed the moment as a built-in altercation amid branches of government. Her self-arresting autonomous representation adjoin what she alleged administrative overreach. Roberts sat still taken ashamed by that framing. Crockett apprenticed on, her articulation steady. The Texas law afore you has prevented an estimated 278,000 acceptable voters from casting ballots. In my commune alone, 42,000 voters, abundantly Atramentis and Latino, accept faced barriers that the 15th alteration forbids. This is not about procedure, Your Honor. It's about whether the Constitution's guarantees are absolute or alone theoretical. She addressed the accomplished court, a cardinal move that kept Roberts from actualization to be her abandoned opponent. This cloister has said voting is the aegis of all rights. If you acquiesce states to actualize obstacles that demonstrably anticipate hundreds of bags of acceptable Americans from voting, abnormally back those obstacles abatement hardest on ancestral minorities, afresh what does the 15th alteration absolutely protect? Amends Jackson gave a baby nod while Amends Barrett took notes. The room's activating had shifted. Crockett was no best defensive. By accomplishments her case in built-in language, she put Roberts in the position of appearing to authenticate the certificate they had all affidavit to uphold. Roberts approved to achieve control. Congresswoman, your time is about expired. Amuse conclude. I'll achieve with this. Mr. Arch-Justice, Crockett replied, articulation firm. The Texas law requires ID that 23% of Atramentis Texans and 27% of Latino Texans abridgment, compared with 4.7% of white Texans. It closes ID offices in boyhood neighborhoods while befitting them accessible in mostly white areas. It rejects affiliated IDs but accepts gun licenses. She met Anniversary Justice's eye. If a law prevents one ancestral accumulation from voting at 3 to bristles times the amount of another, it violates the apparent argument of the 15th Amendment. And if this cloister can't see that, it is not interpreting the Constitution. It is afterlight it. Roberts's announcement hardened. Congresswoman Crockett, that's enough. Your time has expired. That moment, Roberts's attack to cut off an adopted adumbrative discussing built-in voting protections would be broadly criticized and sparked agitation about administrative overreach. Crockett remained composed, the architecture in one duke and the microphone in the other. Rather than argue, she declared calmly, Chief Justice, the architecture does not accord you ascendancy to blackout an adopted adumbrative speaking about the 15th alteration and a case about voting rights. That alteration exists because bodies' inability accept connected approved to blackout those angry for according representation. If you begin this annual of the battle amid Jasmine Crockett and John Roberts useful, amuse, like, and subscribe for added political analysis. Share your thoughts beneath on the showdown, and who ability be the abutting being to avert voting rights at the accomplished levels of government. Your assurance helps us abide accoutrement, these important belief about attention America's autonomous foundations.